It is October, which means it is now socially acceptable for all things Halloween and ghost and witchcraft related, and too much candy and spooky decorations, etc., are now socially acceptable. They were commercially acceptable for a couple months now, but socially now it is acceptable to begin decorating and pumpkin spicing and apple cidering and all of the fall and spooky things, which means also it is time for the Christians to hate witchcraft as they claim to the other, 365 days of the year, but they really focus on it during the socially acceptable cultural celebration of all things witchcraft and fall related in pagan ways. And so today we're going to talk about Christianity's hatred and demonization and satanization of witchcraft and why they do that and what it means, and growing up in that culture and why so many people who leave the church go to witchcraft so quickly. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. So I've talked about this in another episode, but briefly want to kind of go over it again. So many people, particularly women, who leave the church after an evangelical upbringing get drawn to witchcraft. Why is that? I've recently finished reading the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the copy I have is from History Academy, and the majority of this book is a commentary, which I was not expecting, and it also does not seem to be attributed to any particular author, which makes it a little bit questionable, in my opinion, that it's not cited who actually wrote this commentary. However, there was something on page 62 of this that really stood out to me, and I'm going to quote it for you. It's right at the bottom of the page. It says, to, quote, become masculine, unquote, indicates that women are expected to transcend their naturally inferior material natures and become spiritual beings in a symbol system where, quote, female, unquote, codes body, sexuality, and materiality, and, quote, man, unquote, codes mind and spirit. And I think this is why so many women do gravitate towards witchcraft as they're leaving the church, because there is that mentality within the church that's in a lot of ways unspoken but implied, that being a woman means being material. We, in our nature, have a more physical, in this earth nature, just because of the fact that we are the ones that carry the babies and bring them into the earth. It grounds us into a physical state of being in a way that men do not have. They don't experience. And in Christianity, that physical, material nature is demonized. And rather than accepting that demonization as women leave the church, they embrace it, they embody it, they learn to love it, which that's the whole basis of witchcraft, is honoring yourself as a part of this world and your physical nature and your interconnectedness with the world around you. And so it's a natural flow into that. So it's always ironic to me now seeing how Christians attribute everything, call everything satanic, or call everything witchcraft. And let me break it down a little bit. For example, tarot cards, oracle cards. This is witchcraft. This is from Satan, blah, blah, blah. This is what you hear all the time. Okay, well, what are tarot and oracle cards? They are divination tools. Divination is used in the Bible. It was used by Jesus's followers. They talk about casting lots. That's divination. And we see these different tools and the modern tools that are used, and it's automatically called evil. It's attributed to Satan. And I think people who are outside of the church or who have been outside of it long enough that they forget the dogmas and doctrines get very confused and mock the always attributing things to Satan, calling things satanic. Because if you are not within the church, you understand that Satanism, or it is a religion. If you call something satanic, you've got the Church of Satan, you've got Luciferianism, and there are others that are not coming to mind immediately, and that's what anyone outside of the church or other Abrahamic type religions thinks of. But within the church, anything that is not Christianity is of Satan. That's why they call everything satanic. Because if it's not of God, it's of Satan. So it doesn't matter what religion it is. It doesn't matter what culture it is or what practice or who they're attributing it to. It's all Satan. All of the false gods, false in quotation marks, Satan. All of the pagan deities, Satan. Everything is Satan that's not God. Which quite frankly gets exhausting. Because there's so much that isn't the Christian God. And growing up in that, it's like everything, I remember this metaphysical store that used to be near my hometown, and we only went in it twice. We went in it once because we were curious, and my mom found an Enya cassette tape and bought it. And we went back a second time because she wanted another one, but then we decided that it was too evil or whatever. We weren't going in there. And I was so steeped in this mentality. I remember walking in there and just feeling like there was evil all around me. And it's very easy to fabricate feelings when you're indoctrinated into a belief system and a thought pattern. But I remember just this whole feeling, this mentality that was constant, that just everything around you was an enemy. You couldn't really be friends with the people who you were around because most of them weren't really following God, and you're never going to see them in heaven anyway, so why get attached? You try your best to, teach them and help them find God, but most of them are going to reject you, and most of them are going to make fun of you and think you're weird anyway, and that's fine because that's just part of being persecuted as a Christian, and that's just jewels in your crown. And it was just this ideology of having to be careful so much about every single thing that you did or exposed yourself to, because it might lead you away from God. I started doing yoga when I was 15 because I was having horrible problems with my cycle, and I was in so much pain, and it was about the only thing that really helped with the pain and the bad symptoms that I was experiencing. And my dad made me stop doing it because he said it was a false religion. And even though I was thinking of it as exercise, there were things that they were saying in the yoga program that I was watching that were idolatrous and wrong and evil, and that would just get me like compliant or jaded or immune to it or whatever, where I wouldn't even realize it, and before I knew it, then I wouldn't be a good person anymore. I would have lost my soul. So I quit for a while, and then he started traveling out of town a lot, and my mom let me start doing it again as long as he wasn't around. But I couldn't talk about it or whatever. And then she started like doing it with me or watching it with me, and she started making comments about it being idolatrous and it was a worship to a false god, and she made me stop doing it. So I would have to like try to sneak and do it in my room, but it kind of killed it for me as a regular practice for a really long time, because it was almost impossible for me to do it without getting in trouble and having just judgment and hatefulness and all of the things. And I bring that one up because it's just an example. There's so many things that Christians like to talk about as gateways, you know? When people talk about drugs, they talk about gateway drugs, and marijuana is a gateway drug, or cigarettes are a gateway drug, alcohol is a gateway drug. And I'm not going to get into that and whether any of that is true, but Christians like to talk about gateways to sin. Well, that seems innocent, but it's just a gateway to doing something worse. Like Harry Potter was a gateway to witchcraft. And a lot of the people who know me now like to laugh because my parents would never let me read or watch Harry Potter, because it was all about witchcraft and that was a sin, and so we couldn't read it, we couldn't watch it. It was sinful because they didn't want us to end up being witches, and I guess the joke's on them on that one. But it's not just entertainment, though. Entertainment is a big one. Christians talk about this all the time. Well, you can't watch this TV show or movie or read this book or book series or listen to this type of music because it's just a gateway to worse things. It's a gateway, it's a gateway, it's a gateway. Everything's a gateway to something worse. And so you have to guard your heart. They always talk about that. Guard your heart, guard your heart. Because you can't let these evil things in. Oh, it seems innocent, and that's how they get you. You participate in this seemingly innocent thing, and the next thing you know, you're worshiping Satan. Or you're not going to church, or you don't care anymore. And I just find it so interesting that so many of the gateways to sin are not just things that are, like yoga or entertainment. It's things like reading about other religions from the perspective of those who practice them, or reading about science from, scientists who believe in evolution and not creation, or reading self-help books because it teaches you not to depend on God and to depend on yourself. And I just think it's ironic that so many of these gateways are just perspectives that aren't theirs. And that's what's considered a gateway. Like if you expose yourself to other ideologies, then it's gonna pull you away from God. And shortly after leaving the church, I had to sit and think, well, if God is all powerful and his word, Jesus, the Bible, whichever you want to look at it as, that came from him is also all powerful, why is a lie, if you know the truth, able to completely obliterate it to the point that it no longer makes sense and you no longer follow it? Why is a lie more powerful than the truth? If the truth is all powerful because it comes from God, it doesn't make sense. And of course, I'm sure anyone in the church who heard me say that would have plenty of counter arguments about how I'm deceived and how if I still believed, it would make sense to me. But the thing is, it really didn't make sense to me at the time. And I know, I was never a true believer, right? That's what they always like to say. But if exposing the truth to critique makes the truth fall away and lose its power, then was it really the truth to begin with? The Bible compares it to trying it in the fire like a metal. Well, if the impurities that come out in the fire make the whole thing disappear, then it was completely made up of impurities. And it should be able to be tested and checked without it being destroyed. Even the Bible says that in many instances: test me, try me, prove me. God says this to his prophets, his disciples, his followers. But modern Christians don't want it to be tested and tried and proved, because they're not following Jesus. They're following a made-up religion that uses Jesus as its poster boy. And that is almost impossible to get anyone to see who is within that religion, inside of that mentality, because the brainwashing and indoctrination and fear-mongering that the entire religion is based on is so seeded into the reality, into the ideology, into the perception of the world around you, in everyone who is within it, that most do not recognize within themselves the contradictions that exist. And so you can't say something to them like, I think that everyone should be able to practice whatever they believe in, as long as it is not infringing on the rights of anyone else to practice whatever they believe in, or harming anyone. And they, for the most part, cannot wrap their heads around that ideology. They cannot accept that mentality, because that would mean that they are allowing evil to overcome. And so many of them, going back to the Halloween celebration, and which is honestly, it's a commercialized celebration in this country, and it's not even really closely in any way related to its pagan origins, and they still can't stand it. It's as appropriated as Christmas is of the pagan holidays that it mimics or took over, and they still can't stand it. For anyone else to have a celebration of their own beliefs, they look at it as evil and Satan taking over and Satan trying to crush out Jesus. And it's ironic, because according to the Christian belief system, we're supposed to be in the minority. Christians are supposed to be in the minority. Straight is the way, narrow is the gate, few there be that find it. It's supposed to be a very small percentage of the population that actually follows Christianity, that follows Jesus. And they're supposed to be persecuted. They're supposed to be beaten down and outcasts and weird. And it seems like their entire goal is to force everyone to live like them, to impose their beliefs on others, to impose their sense of morality, their ideology on others, and force everyone around them to kowtow to them and not expose them to any other ideologies or cultures or belief systems or anything else. And they will be the first to scream persecution and discrimination just because they have to accept someone else's belief system as having a right to exist and be seen and known. And our entire society is based around this. I think I did another episode on like normal or what's considered normal or anything. You think about this, like family values. What does that mean? Family values. It means Christian living. It means what they have determined that kids should or should not be exposed to. It means Christian music. It means Veggie Tales. It means monogamy. It means the nuclear family. It means going to church on Sundays. It means all of the stereotypical Christian family lifestyle things. And whatever your family and your values are don't count, because they're the ones that get to determine what's socially acceptable. They have that much power in the world that they get to determine what is socially acceptable. And everyone else just has to go along with it. As an example, cussing. Considered abhorrent behavior within most of the Christian community. If you cuss at work around Christian coworkers, they'll complain to the manager. They'll take you to HR. They will cause problems for you because you are determined to be doing something that is offensive. And who is offended by it? Christians. But they are more than welcome to offend anyone else with their religious dogmas and lifestyle, and it's deemed acceptable because it's family values. It's socially acceptable. And I guess really the point of this all is kind of just to bring awareness to it. To those who are now on the outside, who were on the inside, to those who may be struggling with figuring out where they stand now, to those who maybe are having some cognitive dissonance about it and can't quite put their finger on why. But as we go into this, as people like to call it now, spooky season, just please keep in mind that there's nothing wrong with it if you think there's nothing wrong with it. And those who have decided that they get to dictate to you what you can do in your own life, or dictate to stores what they can sell to others that there's a market for, have a bigger problem with themselves than anything else, because the need to control others indicates a lack of control of self. And I think that's just kind of the overarching theme of the Christian way, a complete lack of self-control and needing to control others. Whether you're talking about this or purity culture, or you look at how they pray, I have this problem I need to fix, so I'm going to pray to God to fix it for me, and that's going to change me. There's no real inner work or therapy or trying to work on your own problems. It's just praying and hoping God fixes you, and trying to control everyone else that is, quote, causing you to stumble, rather than working on your own damn self. And if you have a takeaway from this episode, let that be it. If you feel the need to control others and tell others what to do and how they should speak and dress and act and believe, work on your own damn self. Because you're the only one you can control. Your thoughts, your words, your actions. That's what you can control. So if you feel out of control, if you feel the need to control others, work on your own damn self. And happy Halloween. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast or got something out of it. If you did, please follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Instagram and Facebook as Mosaic in Progress. Comment, share, rate us, please. And join us next week on the podcast as we both continue to work on our Mosaic in Progress.